But to unlock political will and investment, we also need to understand the economic cost. And that's where Economist Impact comes in. So to explore the financial burden of sewage pollution and why this evidence matters now more than ever, Anna spoke to Shivangi Jain, Senior Manager at Economist Impact.
Hi, Shivangi. Thank you again for joining us on the Water Action platform. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to dive straight in and talk about this study and about why was it so important to produce this study now? What's about this timing that's critical to getting it out there?
Sure. So this project is part of the Back to Blue initiative. And the goal of the initiative is really to drive measurable impact on ocean health. So it's around raising awareness of some of the key challenges that are facing the ocean and how we can better manage and protect the ocean. And so I think where this study really came from was recognizing an evidence gap in that space. So while we talk a lot about things like plastic pollution and how that impacts the ocean, I think one of the things we realized at the very start as we were conceptualizing this research was that not a lot of people really talk about wastewater pollution. It's something that hasn't really been researched extensively. We've spoken to a number of experts as well, and they identified this as a gap in kind of building a more holistic understanding of the challenges that are facing the ocean from climate change, from human activities, etc. And so that's really what drove this research. So I think for me, actually, one of the most interesting, I guess, or surprising findings was that when you look at the economic losses that we've estimated, they're even quite high when you look at countries where there's actually relatively high levels of wastewater treatment in principle. So, for example, if you look at the UK, which is one of the countries that we've studied, the numbers, yes, are smaller than some of the other countries that we've looked at because the UK has a 97% wastewater treatment rate. But that still doesn't mean that it's not seeing any loss. So, for example, if you look at fisheries in the UK, they see significant impacts from nitrogen discharges. That's one of the things that we found. And so I think what this really highlights is that even treated wastewater can be harmful if it doesn't fully sort of address nutrient pollution.
What sectors are most affected by those losses?
Of course. So the 19.6 billion figure is, as you said, sort of that headline figure that we've reported on. But I think, and it's a striking figure, as you said, it's quite a large number, especially when you think about the fact that that's actually only 4 countries that we've modeled there that contribute to that 19.6 billion figure. But I think what's actually more helpful is to unpack that number a little bit and see what's actually driving it, because that number in itself is kind of meaningless until you know what's actually beneath the surface, so to say. So as you said, the study looks at kind of different sectors, and that 19.6 billion figure is made up of impacts across 3 key sectors that we've looked at. So that's agriculture, fisheries, and human health. Now, the vast majority of that 19.6 billion impact that we see, 80% in fact of that, is coming through from agriculture. So farmers in many regions are relying on untreated wastewater for irrigation. Over time, this leads to soil degradation, crop contamination, and lower yields. And that's what's driving the numbers that we're seeing. 15% then, on top of that 80% from agriculture, is coming from fisheries. So that's sort of when wastewater discharges into water bodies like oceans, lakes, etc. That causes increased nutrients in the water, decreases levels of oxygen, and results in fish kills. So that's the impact that we're seeing there on fisheries. And then finally, the remaining 5% of that 19.6 billion is coming from human health. And you might say that that's not too big if you think about it in the grand scheme of the numbers that we're saying. 5% seems fairly minimal. But then if you think about the numbers in and of themselves, they're actually fairly substantial. So just to give you an example, in India, we've seen we've estimated annual impacts of $250 million every year just from the impacts on human health. And just to put that into perspective, that's about 0.2% of the country's healthcare budget. So that's a large burden on an already strained sector. So that's also fairly significant. So there's a lot that we haven't measured in here, and the numbers are definitely underreported and on the conservative side. So that 19.6 billion, we're talking here about how big it is, but actually in reality, it's probably a lot bigger than that. And the reason for that is because capturing all of the economic impacts, social impacts in a single model is both impractical and infeasible. So what we've kind of chosen to do with our analysis is to focus on those which are either more significant or where better data is available to allow us to measure it in sort of a robust and meaningful way.
So that sounds very much as if there's some good steps being made, but a lot more to do. Shivangi, thank you ever so much for talking with us today.
Of course. Thank you so much, Anna. It's been a pleasure.
Together, Jasmine and Shivangi have highlighted the two sides of the same story. Sewage and wastewater pollution is both a human crisis and an economic liability. The message is clear. This is not just an environmental problem, but one that carries trillions of dollars in costs globally. Now, the encouraging truth is that this is solvable. With stronger infrastructure, sustained investment, and collective advocacy, we can ease the stress on our oceans. We can safeguard communities and realize the value of clean water for generations to come.